of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
which
stands,
stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the August 26th meeting.
So moved.
I
Second.
have one slight correction.
Let me second it and then I can discuss. Need a
Second,
second? Okay, discussion. Go ahead, Fillmore, my apologies.
okay, it's all right. It was a special meeting, but then about halfway down the first page, it says, Ms. Fitzgerald calls the meeting to order at 1 p.m. and then it said regular session. You should probably say special session.
Yep. Stacy, you got that?
Yep. Terry's on here too.
Oh, hi, Terry. Okay.
That's all.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? And one abstention. Motion carries. Excellent. Chairman comments. So I think I'll move those to the end of the meeting. We'll get through all the business. I did want to discuss, and we have the budget a little bit going forward, but we can do that when we get to the budget section. So I will forego my comments. Finance member comments or citizens comments. We'll start with the board member comments. If not, citizen comments. Danielle, is anyone raising their hand?
Stace?
Nope, no one's raising
Okay.
their hand.
Okay. New business. Review process of approving funding requests from departments. So this came out of our last meeting. It was something I believe that Fillmore, you had brought up, correct? Is this the one I'm on, correct? Okay.
Yes.
So do you want to, Fillmore, do you want to talk us through one more time and then we can kind of discuss it as a board?
Sure. In earlier years, there was a general practice, not a regulation or anything, just a general practice, that if there was a request for funds, and that there may have been a threshold, you're not going to worry about a couple of dollars, but a threshold of some sort, that time permitting, that there would be, that the Board of Finance would have two cracks at it, because we only meet once a month. And typically the selectmen would come up and say, okay, we're going to be bringing forward a request for X dollars for Y purpose. And they'd talk about it and give us some background. And then that would give us a month to digest it. And then we would take action the following month at our regular meeting. And this does two things. Number one, it keeps an emergency, something being sprung on us without any real notice. Now, I will say that that was waived if there was a true emergency. If there was, obviously, if there was some sort of catastrophic emergency, or if there was some grant that had just come up that you had to submit, day after tomorrow or something of that sort. So that's why it was not a strict regulation, but it was a common practice, and that allowed things to run pretty smoothly without things slipping through the cracks.
So,
I
yeah,
believe
the
last
board-
time, yeah, go ahead.
No, I agree with you. The Board of Ed also had a similar for any kind of change in policies. They always gave the board 2 readings of it. It can always get waived. As you said, there are certain circumstances that we would waive it. But I think it does give everyone a chance to ask questions, kind of understand where the money's going. So I actually think it's a good idea. I agree. We don't need a policy. We don't need a policy, or we don't need a reg for it, because I think we don't want it to become a hindrance for anybody. But I think where we can allow the board more time to get more information, I think that's important. And I think generally, for Peggy, from the town side, they know when things are coming. And they can give us a heads up, and that would be the first time. And then the second time would be when we would actually vote on it. So I think it's a good idea. I have no objections to it. Does anyone else or have any questions for Fillmore?
Is Peggy on this?
She
call?
is not. She's not. And again, I did talk to her in joint leadership about it. And I just simply said, it's not going to hinder anything. If the money needs to be done, we could do it. But, generally more that she would bring it before coming for the actual vote,
Yeah.
rather than saying we slow up when she needs the money. So this is just, and I think we've done a good job of trying to focus on communication. I think this is just another example of that. Jude, did you have something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm wondering exactly what it is that we're looking at doing. I understand the concept and I agree with that. And that should be not only from the town, but from the school as well. But are we talking, if it's not a regulation or a policy, are we talking about just some informal letter, or what are we actually talking about doing?
So I think I would be best practice. I think we'd look at it as a best practice. I agree. I think a letter to the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen that just says, moving forward, this is the ideal. This is the situation that we would like to move forward in terms of how money is requested in the spirit of open communication, preparation, and being able to articulate what the money's for. So I think we could do that, just a letter.
And I think going back, it wasn't necessarily just a letter, but also, Peggy or the Board of Ed person or the department head or whoever would come to our meeting and say, we're going to be coming to you to ask for X for this reason. And we'll bring it forward officially next month. So that
Right.
that's
Yeah.
sort of the way it works.
Yeah.
It
And
sounds like
I
a-
like that. I think it's good.
So
Definitely.
tomorrow we do have a senior staff meeting and I can certainly relay that information to all the department heads.
That would be great.
Okay,
And again, it's not to slow anything up. It's just a matter of us all being on the same page and being able to articulate the needs for the money.
But is this essentially dealing with special appropriations? Because everything else is kind of in process, right? So that's what we're talking about.
Correct.
So does
Yeah.
it just, are we just gonna have it apply to all special appropriations or put some kind of minimum threshold?
So that becomes the question. I think that's how Fillmore started, the nickel and dime. Do we really need to do those? Not sure. So what would, do we go with threshold of other things when, 25, 50?
I mean,
I'm not
my-
sure.
My 2 cents is none of us, I don't think, not speaking for others, none of us love special appropriation requests, period. So maybe have it just be for special appropriations, but obviously
Okay.
if one comes in that's de minimis or whatever, we
Mhm.
certainly can always act on it, right? We don't.
Yeah.
We're not.
Yeah, we
forced
can-
to-
Yeah, since it's
maybe-
just
maybe
a
that's-
best
maybe that's the
practice, we
way.
can leave it
We
anytime
don't
we
want to,
want.
we don't want to encourage anyone to bring them forward. Right?
Good. Any other questions, comments? Good. So Stacy, you will bring that to the leadership,
to the senior staff meeting
senior
tomorrow.
staff, excuse me,
Yep.
yes. Good. Next,
I
review 2021 tax collection status. Stacy.
Jude. Jude,
Oh,
did you
I'm
want
sorry.
to?
No, I was just going to ask Jean, I'm sorry, this goes to the previous item.
That's okay.
I was recalling that you had sent a letter out about a year ago about requests over a certain threshold that I think it was that we weren't going to entertain them. Do you remember what letter I'm talking about?
No, I
There
don't think
was,
so.
I'm going to have to look
Was
back.
I just, there's a regulation for, Stace, what's the reg for that? It has to go to town meeting?
Oh, you know what I was thinking of? If it was a request, if it was a special appropriation over a certain amount, it would have to go to CIP before it came to us. That was a letter that you sent
Okay,
out.
right, just to keep it,
Right.
that was really just to enforce the process.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other
Okay.
questions on that? Good? Okay, the tax collection, Stace.
Okay, so last month you guys had asked me how the tax collections looked. And I had said they were much better than I projected, due to the deferral that we did offer for the 3 months. This month I can reiterate that they are much better than what I projected. So we're good. You do have a revenue report. We're at about 45% of our total collections. Last year at this time, we were at 55%. However, we still have a month and a half until the deferral period runs out. So in my projections, when we originally offered that 3-month delay, we had assumed that we were going to get a lot less in. So we're looking good, and it's not too shabby compared to last year.
Good.
Just wanted to give you, an update and keep you updated on the tax collections.
When does it run out? Is it October 31st
Yes,
or October 1st? The 31st?
yes,
Okay.
Well, that's
thank you.
what I was gonna say. It's October 1st, I guess, technically, right? But it has the same 30-day. Is that how it's
correct.
like July
Yes.
1 really is July 1st?
From August 1st to November 1st,
So it's
yes,
really effectively, it's all at the end of October.
yes.
Good.
You have a little more time, Justin. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, next, review the 21-22 CIP committee process and budget process. So this is where, at the beginning of the budget process last year, we had talked about, what are our expectations? What are our beliefs or, philosophical beliefs about the budget and how we were going to move forward. So I wanted to try to bring this up early on so we can kind of talk about where we are, in terms of our expectations. To be very clear, we cannot tell the Board of Ed, we cannot tell the town what, what they can do. But I think a discussion, and this goes back to Peggy and I always trying to have open communication about what people think, what we're looking at. So I wanted to have a discussion about the budget and the budget process, how we thought it went last year. Are there things you want to see different this year? So I just wanted to kind of give everybody an opportunity to talk about that. And then the CIP process. Stace, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that the Board of Selectmen are meeting to review the proposed projects, correct?
On Monday,
On Monday, and then they will vote and move what they come up with. Peggy did say that they are talking about moving some projects around based on COVID, based on town needs. So we'll get more information on that. Any other thoughts? I guess we'll start with the CIP. Jude, you're
Yeah.
chair of the CIP. Any thoughts on that?
One of the things that I was going to address with the committee this year is that we're looking out at a 5-year plan for the departments. And unless there is a change in those first 4 years, we're pretty much just looking at the 5th year. That's the way historically I understand it's been done. And there certainly are efficiencies to that. But my impression after going through that process last year is that it seemed very rushed. And I think that there are many of us, I would think, on the CIP who would like to take a little bit more time and look at all 5 years. I mean, we did if there was a question that came up, but it just seemed a little rushed, and I would like it to be a more thoughtful process this year.
Hey, Jean, can you expound on that a little bit? What specifically was
Yes.
rushed?
So Jude or Jean, what are you saying?
Jude, I'm sorry.
We're
Okay.
fungible, Jean,
Sorry.
The Jays.
the Jays. So when the departments come to us, Kenny, we have their CIP requests going out to a
Yep.
5-year.
Yeah,
The only new information on each department sheet that we get for their request is the column in the 5th year, because the columns just move every year
so aren't
as
the
we go
first
through
4
them.
years set then? Like, so the first 4 years are set and they're talking about the 5th year?
Sometimes there are changes.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to vehicle purchases and things like that, they may move things
Okay.
around, they may
Yeah.
get different deals going. So when you say set, they're in there because whatever year they came in, they were discussed. When they were in the 5th year column, they were discussed.
Yeah.
And the CIP committee at that time, decided that was a good plan and to save for those items.
Okay.
But they really haven't been looked at in the intervening 5 years.
So you're saying if something changed and they
That's
moved
pretty much when we looked at
assets,
them,
if they-
unless,
if they moved a request to have something moved up from say year 4 to year 2, there would be no discussion about that?
no, that's a change.
Yeah.
So if there was a
So-
change in it, we would look at that.
So what-
If someone had a question, we would, but pretty much if it was in years 1 through 4, if there
and there's
wasn't
no
a change,
No question, it stays.
it kind of went through without any real
Is that
discussion.
the plan? Isn't that the plan for the process though? 'Cause
Yeah,
the-
yeah, can I jump in for 1 second,
Yeah,
Stace?
sure.
I'll let you jump in too. So the CIP is supposed to be a 5-year plan, and ideally,
Right.
it is a matter of when the selectmen bring forward their plan, they are looking at the 5 years with the intent of saving for those projects so that each year we have enough money to do the projects.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So in the way the CIP was written, the only year that really the CIP committee, and Stacey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the only year they really need to look at
It's year five.
is the 5th year, as Jude
Those are new
described,
requested
because,
purchases, right?
correct. But
Yeah.
generally what happens is there is planning money in 1 year and then the project. So it's generally in the year that you start to look at in the 5th year, if the project is technically in the 6th year, which we
Yeah.
don't cover, but in the 5th year, you would have the money to do the study to get the actual costs of things. If there's a grant, you would find out in that year what you had to actually cover the project. So that was the plan for the CIP. And it was not the intent that every year that 5-year plan would change, because then we really were not saving for it. And then it became a pay as you go kind of plan, which wasn't working. That's what low cap ended up being, and it didn't really work. So that's I think, if Stacey, if I said this correctly, that was the ideal of the
And that
CIP.
makes sense. I'm just trying to understand, Jude, what
Mhm.
the issue is and what you're trying to solve for.
What I'm trying to solve for is the fact that I understand that years 1 through 4 I just think they should be looked at, just because you've had 4 years of experience. There may have been other things that impact the costs that we're incurring, or the need even. And it just
So
seems like I understand the efficiency of it, and I don't want to interfere with the efficiency, but I do
no,
think
I'm
there
just-
should be more attention paid to what actually is going on in those 4 years. And we
Okay.
shouldn't just be looking at the 5th year.
So is the Board of Selectmen not pleased with their requested capital plan for those first 4 years, and they're suggesting that they need to change? I'm just trying to, again, say, I'm trying to understand what the issue is to solve for what the issue is.
Okay, yeah. So for me, the issue is that we kind of have this obligation to look to make sure that the town is doing its due diligence
course.
and looking at where it's going to spend money and how it's going to spend money,
Right.
and how it's going to collect money, which we just don't do a whole lot of.
Mm.
But in this process, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of due diligence given in any particular year for the CIP projects that have already been scheduled. Because something was put on the schedule 5 years ago, it for 4 years in a row, it just kind of goes through, and we haven't really looked at it and taken into any consideration anything that might impact it. It's just doing a bit more due diligence by looking at those requests, what's been in there, what we've saved for, to see if that is really the appropriate thing that should be done, or if we can see where maybe there should be attention given to some projects. I think Justin last year, the cars, the vehicles for the town, it seemed like every time we were looking, a department was changing its requests or the way it had been requesting. And
Right.
everybody was doing it differently. So that was like, well, Peggy was going to talk about getting this big program together. And I don't think there's been able to be much work done on that. So we're going
Right.
to
So
run
I-
against that again this year too.
Right. So I think the issue is that the planning of those projects is the Board of Selectmen. That's not the CIP. The CIP can only work with what the selectmen, because they're the planning mechanism of the town. So my suggestion would be because what Peggy's going to do is, and her board is, they're going to review everything and move it forward. So they're only going to move forward the priorities that they believe. So sometimes the selectmen may pull a project for, as you described, Jude, that it's not a priority anymore, but it's really not the CIP's role to say, this should be done first, then this, unless there's a financial impact to say, we can't do this. So I think, although I understand what you're saying and I agree, I don't think it's the role of the CIP to do that. I think it's just the financial impact of the projects that are moved forward from the selectmen. Stace, am I right in that?
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
the plan comes from the Board of Selectmen. This is what they believe we need in town. The regulation basically says that this is a 5-year plan. Year 1, we're pretty much committing to those projects, but years 2 through 5 are subject to change. So Jude, you're right. These things can change. In a perfect world, they will not change. The dollars won't change, and only year 5 will have new additions, but that never happens.
No.
And I can say though, Jude, last year we were a little bit off because of the election. So we normally start, the document is due to the committee by October 15th. This year, we will start much earlier than we did last year. Our first meeting last year was December 16th. So we could technically start October 16th. We had our first meeting December 16th, and then we went into January after the holidays, January 7th, and then we had 8 meetings every Tuesday, Thursday of the week. So it was so condensed. We were under a time crunch. This year will be so different. So we'll have more time to dedicate to years 2 through 5. But as you said, they're subject to change. One other thing I just wanted to mention with the fleet, that has been up for a review, for a study for many years. So we pretty much put the whole plan on a hiatus. We paused it, saying we were going to do a fleet study. Year after year, we didn't do this study. We did just commit to doing the study. We signed with a consultant. So this year, hopefully will be different with all of the town fleet, and we'll know more about that. But we were trying to move things forward and not having vehicles die. As you know, 3 vehicles died before they were scheduled for replacement because we needed this study. So I think we'll be in a much better boat in this upcoming season.
So that may give you some more time, Peggy, and have more discussions with the selectmen. Justin, did you want to say something? Did I cut you off?
I'm on the CIP, so I'm not speaking for Jude, but I think from my observation and experience, it was kind of like, and I think this is what Jude is saying today, if something was approved, you know, for year 5 or accepted, I'll say, you know, not approved, but accepted, then so long as the project itself didn't change, it would just kind of flow through year 4, year 3, year 2, year 1. And really, like, I think what I'm hearing is, you know, so long as nothing has changed, timing or cost, it's really not it's not the CIP's role to like question that. And I kind of feel, I thought it was last year, or I think it should be, like, you know, because obviously one thing that can change is the world, like it has now. So I would have thought, if we're looking at, you know, COVID and the economy, that if there's a project moving forward from year 3 to year 2, that the CIP might be the group that would say, you know, we just can't afford that anymore, or at least not now. But I guess.
So the difference, what you're saying, Justin, and the key words that you use, we can't afford it. That's where the CIP can say, we don't recommend this because we can't afford it in this year.
So you don't
Right.
select
Determines what
the
determines
projects,
affordability.
Justin. You don't select the projects
Correct.
for your opining on, but you could certainly say, hey, you know, based on this, on what we're seeing this year and our budget availability, we need to look at our year 3 plans, because we're going to be short of what the need is, and we may need to, you know, shuffle the deck.
Right, but so what are the, you know, what are the objective what are the criteria, I guess, for affordability? Like, what, you know, is, I mean.
So that becomes, when you look at what is saved within the CIP for each year, you look at the balance, you look at the expenditures that are coming out for CIP and CNRE, and then you decide. You may have to say, you know what, we can't do both these projects, even though they want it in year 2. We can't do year 2 together because we have not saved enough money, because we've got these unexpected costs, you know, with shields or whatever it is for the COVID. So your recommendation from the CIP would be, we need to move this project to the 3rd year to allow for the expenditures that, you know, maybe the selectmen have said this is a bigger priority. So your job is to work through the recommendations financially so that it makes sense to the town can afford to do them in that. The
Right, but
selectmen, all
right.
they do is say, here's all the projects we need, this is when we need them done. But if we can't afford it, then that's where the CIP and Board of Finance says, we can't afford it. Even you may need it, but we can't afford it in a given year.
Right,
Justin, hold on, as a point of clarification, Jean, is it CIP's purview to say when the project can get done, or is it a matter of saying there are not enough funds in this given year to accommodate this project, and you flip it back to the Board of Selectmen and they have to rejigger the schedule?
No, generally, if the projects within the 5 years move forward, that is then in the purview of the CIP to say,
All
we
right.
can get these done within 5 years, because the selectmen have said, we need this done within 5 years. But the CIP says what we can do, what order we can do it in, because we can afford it, that the funds are there.
So
And by
the CIP sets
affordability,
the order. Okay.
by affordability, we're talking about, it's not, we're talking about basically the money that has been kind of accounted for within the CIP formulas or reserve kind of sinking funds. Is that what we're talking about?
Correct. And then your job of the CIP then is to, and Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, the job of CIP is to say, we need to save this amount of money
Right.
moving forward so that we can cover these projects. Which
Right.
is why whenever we talk about during the budgets, what do we put into the CIP? It's because the committee has mapped it out and said, you need X amount of funds this year, you need X amount of funds. And the CIP will say, yes, we need to do the field in the 3rd year, which means in the 2nd year, we need to have, you know, hire the consultant, get a cost estimate more accurate, you know, because 5 years out, it can change, but the year before, you really want to nail down those funds.
Yeah.
So then you start, that's why the only thing that the public votes on is that current year. And that's where you're planning and you're forecasting the amount of funds that we will need.
So that's a huge point, Jean, and that's what I was gonna say. You gotta remember, this is a planning tool. You know,
Right.
nothing is set in stone from years 2 through 5. in addition to that, this is a recommendation from the CIP committee. They're an arm
I was-
from the Board of Finance, and
Yeah.
it's a recommendation based on what the Board of Selectmen provides to them, a recommendation back to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to approve as far as how to fund these projects of what the Board of Selectmen is recommending, so.
Right. I
We're-
did want to point that out, Justin. All we really do is make the recommendation.
Well, not even the recommendation, we just confirm that it can be, it's affordable, or that the CIP account has enough to pay for it.
Or that, and you have, as the planning mechanism, you're gonna plan out how much money has to go in each year
Right.
in
To-
order to complete the plan. So
Right.
financial aspect of it.
Yeah, so we're not there to speak, which I was, we're not there to speak like recommending qualitatively or otherwise, this project or that project, or questioning the need for a truck or a boat or a car or whatever, which I did quite a bit last year. So I obviously didn't know what my role was, and made a few friends along the way doing that. So I just want to make sure I understand what what our role is. I guess I thought that was.
Well, Justin, I think you have the ability to push back and say, do you absolutely require this in this year, right?
Right. Right.
I would take it further. I was kind of saying, do you need this period, but it sounds like that's not really what the role of CIP
Well,
is.
I mean,
Well, if you feel the expense of it is not warranted or we can't afford it, maybe not warranted, but we can't afford it, then yeah, you could ask for a study. You could say, we can't approve the funds for this until there is the study of the fleet. So
well,
we
it's a
can't
balancing act
approve it.
too, right? Because if you got all these other requests that are in line, you can then prioritize, right? Based
Yeah.
on what the need is and the costs associated with it. And then, push back on as it relates to when should this happen and if.
Right. And
Yeah,
I think one of the
and
things
a
that
lot-
we worked on in the past was to say, and this was really Bennett, was clear. How do we prioritize the needs? How do we say, because what was happening is it was becoming a wish list. So the town was pushing forward everything. And the Board of Finance was saying, hold on, you can't have everything. And they were waiting for us to kind of untangle it. I don't think that's what's happening anymore, but that was a huge problem. So what was happening then is the Board of Finance had to say, what are going to be our criteria? So one of the things Bennett tried to come up with was this kind of coding that said, this is a safety issue. This is a health and wellness issue. This is a life, help me, what's the word I'm looking for? Quality of life issue.
Quality.
This is an environmental issue. So he would say, if the Board of Selectmen are going to push all these projects forward and we know we can't afford them, then we're going to prioritize them within the 5 years, because what they pushed forward had to be done within 5 years. We were going to prioritize based on some kind of scale of what we valued and could afford within another year. I think the valued part was where it kind of broke down with board members, because we should not have been valuing it. But what we could have said was, if you're going to give us 5 projects and you're not going to tell us, you want them all done in year 1 and we can't afford year 1, then the committee can say, then it's our decision to say we can afford this year, this next year, and this the 3rd year. And that's where, Justin, I think you asked the question, why do you need this in year 1? I think that becomes, because when you are trying to decide how much money we can allot to certain projects, I think you can ask, why is this such a priority in year 1? And why are 5 projects in year 1 a priority?
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does to me. Does it to you, Justin?
It does. I'm still a little lost, but I'll get there in terms of, okay, we can afford it. Well, yeah, we can afford anything if we raise taxes enough, but we don't. So I'm still trying to just figure out what is, but we don't want to do that. So what is,
So
what's,
as elected officials on the committee, my point would be, we're not going to raise taxes to meet the requests. We're going to look at rational decisions. And that's where, as a board, we look at what we're looking at in terms of budget increases and why we forecast and why we use that spreadsheet that Stacy has where we put in all the variables. and we say, we know we can, this is roughly where we can go with the funds. And that is our job then to say what can fit in what year.
And I think that goes to what you were saying, Kenny. I mean, as we're looking at the 5 years, Jean, there are 5 things coming up in year 1. They've been approved for 4 years. So things just kind of go through and it's like, well, now wait a minute. Can we afford to do all of this year? If we switch something from year 3 to year 1 and 2 things from year 1 to year 2, do the dollars work out better? Because you, again, like
Right.
everything that we try to do, we try to keep it as even as possible. So you're not going to have this like huge request coming out of the CIP for funding for this year, or maybe it's not bad for this year, next year, but in year 3, we're going to get creamed, that kind of a thing. So, I mean, that's where I think we need to pay attention more, do a little more diligence on what has already been put in and scheduled, to make sure that what was put on there 5 years ago, it still makes sense to be doing this year. Maybe that's just a better way of
Oh, that's,
saying it.
and that's fine. And I think you also have the ability, right, to say, you know, if it's in year 1 right now, right, and for some reason there's extenuating circumstances where there's 3 other projects that have more of a greater need, you can reshuffle the deck. Right.
So, and I think
Well,
going
you-
back
you
to
can
that,
do
what
that.
we found years ago was we needed this plan because an example was, if we were I'm gonna use Academy. I'll probably get shot. Probably not a good idea, but with Academy, we needed some kind of comprehensive plan to say, you don't put new windows on a building that you're gonna close. So if one department wants to put solar panels on the gym, that's fine. But if the gym is going to be renovated in the 3rd year, we're not going to put solar panels on it now. So part of what the committee was doing was taking these projects and making a little bit more sense of doing things in an order in which we could afford, and that brought together a comprehensive look at all of the capital needs in a way that makes sense and were efficient, and the projects could be done in the right order. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So
So,
with regards to the CIP, Jean, would you like to go back and try to identify the criteria that we would be using, or did you think that just it kind of fell apart trying to use that kind of a?
It's in the regulation, Jude. If you read the
Yeah.
regulation, there's bullet points in there of the different criteria.
right,
Well,
I
I
think
guess
for,
prioritizing the criteria.
right, and that's where I think you have to look at what's in front of you, because I think that was where we were getting pigeonholed. You know, for me, what's a quality of life versus what you know, is a necessity, or is a health requirement. You know, those were the kinds of things that the committee had to look at together. So I think we agreed that the bullet points that were outlined within the CIP were up to the committee then to try to say, rather than have this kind of every year, this is what we call a quality of life issue. This is what we call, you know, whatever. It just became too rigid, and there were too many, because projects can fall into multiple categories, right? And then how do you decide what category? If it's in 3 categories, who decides which category makes more sense or is more important? So I think that's where it's up to the committee to kind of look at everything that's in front of them and then make those decisions based on what we can afford.
Okay. We can move
Does that
on.
make sense?
Yeah.
You know, it's not a perfect process, and those, you know, Fillmore, you and I lived through low cap. It's the idea, it's really good in theory, but because there's so many complicated facets of them, the projects, it's not as clean cut as you want it to be. And it's not as clear because there are so many mitigating factors. So I think that's why the committee is so important. It's important that they come from all the boards and kind of work through that process.
And one thing I think we did do last year, which I think is certainly a helpful step to that, is just reminding the groups and, that you do need to bring things in a fifth year. You can't bring things in, and say, I need them tonight or even next year. They're kind of trying to hold that. And I could see that is difficult. I mean, who knows 5 years out, but, still that's a very good, practice.
And I think, it's funny you say, who knows 5 years out? There's a lot of things we know, right? So we know when a field has to be redone. We know when a roof has to be redone. We know when an HVAC system has to be redone. So there's actually,
It's a
when you
planning
think
mechanism.
about it,
Well, yeah.
less of the unknown
Yes.
than you actually think there is. So, and it does prevent people from saying in the third year, oops, I forgot we've got to returf the fields, because that's a foul right there. Clearly, you knew the field was going to need to be done.
Right.
And I think that prevents that kind of dropping in of these large projects once the system is underway. And I think that's really where we were hoping it would prevent, and then we could plan better. And that's really what all this was about. We just can't, pay as you go. And each year we look at the projects and say, okay, we'll raise taxes to this point so we can pay for all these projects. And rather to have these savings each year so that when the larger projects come, like the fire truck, like an ambulance, we have the money in it and nobody's taxes are getting hiked up because of it.
Yeah, and one of the, let me piggyback on a comment you made a second ago, Gene. The flip side of that is, you mentioned a roof. Now we know that a roof is good for, pick a number, 20 years. And so when a certain roof is on its 15th year, you stick it in for 5 years from now.
Mhm.
But in 4 years, as you come up on it, somebody can inspect it and say, geez, this roof's
No,
got
it's true.
4 years on it. So, you doesn't mean you automatically re-roof it just because you came up
As you
with
hit
one.
that year, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
so you do need to take a look at these.
Okay. All right, good. Any questions on that? So the budget process, last year we kind of brought everybody in. I thought it went very well. We brought in people prior to the different departments. We brought in Austin, we brought in Scott. So we had a good idea going into the budget what people needed. Now it got, unfortunately due to COVID, a lot of what we had planned kind of got sidetracked, but I think we had a good process going into it. We were well informed in terms of, I think, the needs, and I think Peggy, another reason why the retirement is coming before us, we're getting more information, so we're prepared more for what's happening and working collaboratively. So that piece of it, I was happy with. Would board members agree with that?
Yeah,
I like
absolutely.
hearing from the
Again,
department heads.
I think
like
it's,
having them before us.
Yeah. And again, I'm trying to avoid that kind of budget crunch and having them go to department heads going to 3 different meetings and, gradually, and it goes back to them coming to us before, and kind of where Fillmore is going with the special appropriation, come to us before, have a conversation. So as we start to do our budget forecasting, we can kind of plan for these things.
but I also think it's important to set the tone, right? So we are asking, and I think we're doing a nice job of making sure, to your point, that we're communicating across to the town with Peggy and her board, Katie and her board with the Board of Education, to make sure that there's no surprises.
Right.
There's not a lot of last minute requests, right? We are in a very challenging environment right now. We were last year. I think 2021 is going to be maybe even more challenging, with, I think, a lot of people that are out there that are working through some challenging times financially. A lot of businesses that are working at a 50% capacity because of the restrictions of COVID-19, social distancing, people being laid off, people being furloughed. So I think it's going to be super important to set the tone as a town, as a board, as a group, that we're looking to do the best we can. But at the same time, people are falling upon some challenging times. So we as a board, we as a group together need to do our best to make sure that we are working as efficiently as we possibly can to ensure that we're going to give everybody the best chance to succeed. But people need to understand that they need to be working within a mindset of, hey, we need to really kind of buckle down and take out and look at our budgets as, hey, here's what we need in order to work through a year without a lot of extra add-ons, right? Without a lot of nice to haves. This is, I think, a time in our in our group and in our lives that we need to again keep our eye on the prize, which is trying to make it as seamless and easy as possible for people to have an affordable tax bill in the upcoming year. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to leverage communication across the board, set the right tone, and then work together as collective groups to deliver something to the people of the town that is going to be as unintrusive as possible. That's my view. That's my view anyway. And
Any
my
other board
dog's
member
view.
comments?
There were,
Justin, you're not,
oh,
wait,
sorry.
Justin, sorry, Danielle, go ahead, what?
I was just gonna say there were some comments when you guys were talking about the CIP.
Okay, from members of the public?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't, remind me of that, Danielle, so I don't forget, and we do citizen comments, we'll bring them in, okay?
Oh, okay, sorry.
But no, just don't let me forget, okay? Thanks.
Okay, sounds good.
Justin, you were muted when you were talking
Yeah,
before.
sorry. I was just going to say, I would generally agree with Ken. I mean, I think we should do that every year. You know, certainly the town has needs and basically I think the town for the most part provides needs to the town, not really that many wants. But we do need to look at the budget in every year very carefully. And let's, you know, one of the things even longer term in my mind, having grown up in Madison and looking at Madison, this is a residential town that's largely built out. So in terms of like our grand list, looking not just this year, but you know, down the road, there's not a whole lot of opportunities for us to like expand the revenue side, to expand our grand list. And you know, at some point, taxes can go up, but they without like an offsetting revenue or not meaning an offsetting grand list, they just can't go up forever. I mean, eventually it just becomes unsustainable. So I think maybe COVID obviously puts an added emphasis on it, but I would hope that we're always kind of looking for ways to make sure, which is happening, but just always keep our eye on the ball that you know, like any organization, any business, any town, we need to run as efficiently and as effectively as we can to give people what they need and what they want to pay for, but always looking at ways to save if we can. And even more so in a year like this. But I think this is just knowing how Madison is built, you know, with kind of I'll say essentially a capped revenue stream, a capped grand list because of its nature, which is one of the benefits, you know, the positives of Madison. You know, you're not going to see a 20-story building pop up in downtown to, you know, bring in a lot of revenue. I think that's always a focus that we should keep an eye on.
And Justin, to your point, I think, you know, with that grand list, we don't know whether our collection rates in the past have been tremendous. We've been very, very efficient with our tax collection. I don't know. We don't know at this point whether or not we are going to hit those same numbers. So it's just something else that we have to consider.
Right.
Any other board member comments? So I think for me, you know, and I said this last year, when we offset the budget with the undesignated fund balance, we begin next year's budget process in the hole, if you will, the 675 Stace. You're muted.
673.
673. So we just got to keep in mind that we have to make up that 673, and we can use the undesignated fund balance again. I mean, I'm not arguing that, but there are some, you know, we're starting out in a way that we need to make sure that we keeping that in mind as we move forward. I think one of the things we talked about too, and I think it was only 30%, Stace, correct me if I'm wrong, that for a lot of people, their taxes are in escrow from the bank. So a lot of what we collected had already been collected before COVID hit and we had all these issues. So that's another reason why our collection rate has been consistent. We may not have that next year. So I just want to keep those things in mind as we move forward. People got their stimulus checks. People were, small companies got loans. So things were kept afloat. That can't go on forever. And I just want to keep that in the back of our mind. I don't know what's going to happen, but those are some of the things that as I move forward, I want to be cautious about. And I think come January, and we talked about this in joint leadership today with Katie and Peggy, come January, we'll have a better handle on those things, but we don't know. We don't know if we're going to have a second surge. We don't know if schools are going to go, and hopefully in October, they're planning to go back full time if there's no issues. But if they get pulled out of that, what happens then? So there's just so much unknown. And I think we'll be a little bit better off in January to make some of those assessments. But I just want to make sure that as we start to talk about the budget process, as we start to talk about expectations, that people understand there's still variables we don't know. And we have to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball of knowing that all of these things are going to come into the discussion. Anything else? And I will say, I'm going to always advocate for the ambulance. There are certain departments that I believe we need to protect. Whatever that looks like, it's not my decision or this board's decision to talk about the planning. But I think the ambulance is an area in which we're going to need to figure out what we're doing with them. The study will help that, and we will have a better handle on that. But that's an area in which, and I know Fillmore feels the same way, that's an area of protection for, while we go through this COVID, while we go through the unknown, that we have the emergency services to help the community. And I want to make sure that we're funding those appropriately. Jude?
You mentioned the study for the ambulances. Do you know when we're expecting results from that study?
I do not. I don't think Peggy had them either, but she did sign for the study, correct, Stace?
No, she's signed for a couple. I'm not sure if the ambulance has actually moved forward yet, but the
We
other.
can you double check on
I
that?
think
Yep.
last month we were on a call together. That was a priority, right? Was to get that done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, she said that.
we've been on this now for a year, right? And we've made the request many times to get that done, Gene.
Yep.
And we've even stripped out the other emergency services and said, hey, we're only going to go with the ambulance, right? And here we
Right.
are coming up against another budget season and still nothing's been done. So I don't think it's on us, right?
Right, and that's something that we'll follow up and see. I think Peggy was committed to it, so I will double check with her. I just did not ask her today. Anything else with the budget? I think it's something we'll revisit, over the next couple of meetings, and we'll again, because I agree, setting a tone with what we're looking at is important. I don't like surprises. I didn't like them when I was Board of Ed chair. I don't like them as Board of Finance chair. And I'm sure Peggy doesn't like them either. So I think the more communication we have and the more open we are about our thoughts about the budget is really important for the community. Okay.
Are we going to try I think we'll all endeavor to have another year of a flat or no increase. Is that the communication that we'll be providing to, the other boards as an expectation, or what's the plan?
That's really up to the board. I don't, I think that's something we need to discuss, which I'm
Yeah.
open to discussing now if you want, or our next meeting. But that is something for the board to decide.
Okay.
Any thoughts on that? put it on
And,
future
you know, just
agenda. What?
looking at last year, I haven't been around long enough, but I kind of think that's never happened in Madison's history, at least certainly not their recent history. And I mean, I think that's a great accomplishment by everyone. You know, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, the Board of Ed, to be able to do that. You know, and the Finance Department just for having such good, strong financials. And that's kind of what I meant: a situation where we can keep taxes low, or maybe even a dream would be to lower them, and still be able to provide all the services that the people need and even want. And I think that's a great, you know, certainly a great goal to have every year, but certainly in a year like this, you know, with all the other variables.
I agree with
just
that.
want to add to that, though, in looking at the cuts we did end up making last year, one of my concerns was that we were not really cutting off fluff. We were cutting off things that need to be, you know, they need to be addressed. And every year you put it off, they just become more expensive. So I have no, while I think that trying to go for the goals that Ken and Justin, you were just talking about, is laudable, and looking what we can afford, I think we also have to keep it in mind that part of what we have to afford is making sure that we're taking care of the town's assets in a responsible way, so that when we do get out from this COVID situation that we're in, we're not looking to try to put too much on the taxpayers to make up for everything that we didn't approve during these years.
So I think going back to,
It's just part of the process.
right, and
I-
I think,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I think like when we start to look at the capital assets, like the school, they have, you know, just hired a superintendent or in the process of a brand new superintendent. So I think that, you know, they'll come in and that's something that the board will have to look at. I haven't had too many conversations about, you know, usually with joint leadership, it's about COVID. But I think we're going to have to start looking at what's happening with Academy, what's happening with the schools. So that is going to be a piece of this. You know, and I'm not sure what their plans are. It's not our decision on that. It's theirs. But, you know, I think that to your point, Jude, that is going to be a piece of this. Ken, did you say something?
No, I was just, you know, I just, you know, I agree with Gene that, you know, you don't want to, you know, step over nickels to pick up pennies, but at the same time, I just think it's a timing issue, right? So it's just a rough time for everybody all around. And if we
Yeah,
do have to, hit the pause button, you know, to get people back on their feet, and then, you know, that's something that we'll have to talk about.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you start to look at decisions that are going to be made moving forward, prioritized by the town
Right.
in this post COVID world that we're going to be living in and what that looks like. And, you know, I think the Board of Ed and Katie and I have talked about this. You know, we got the money from the CARES. The CARES was the money, right, Stace? And they're using that for their expenses. So normally that would come as a special appropriation. They got their money and, you know, they said, okay, we're good now. They took the special appropriation off the table and they're using those funds. Those are the kinds of decisions that I think we're looking for everybody to make in just being, you know, careful with their funds, how they're using them, maybe doing line item transfers before they ask for special appropriations. You know, in the past, when I was chair at Board of Ed, you know, and I know Board of Ed has done it under Katie, you know, if we're looking and we're getting nervous about crossing the finish line with our funds, you start to freeze some funds and you start to say, discretionary funds we're not spending and we're going to hold off certain areas until we figure out what we need. And I think for me, I would like to see that at least till January, that things are frozen just a tad bit so that we can now regroup in January and see what's in the budget, what's left in people's budgets and what they need. So I think that's an approach we can take, is to suggest that that's a way to handle it. And I know, again, we've done it on the Board of Ed side. I think the town has two, Stace, haven't they, in the past? Yeah, so I think it's not, I think that's a smart way to start this, is to at least to find out what's gonna happen in the next couple of months, maybe just freezing funds that, you know, we can freeze as a town, as a Board of Ed, and wait and see what's gonna happen, so we can cross the finish line without a lot of special appropriations.
I agree.
You know, but the unfunded mandates, you know, that's going to be a problem for if we are told under the Emergency Act that they have to do things, we're going to have to fund it. So our hope then is that the freezing of certain funds and balances will be able to help offset that, so the taxes are not raised. Anything else? Thoughts, comments? You know, I just think it's important we have these conversations. I think it's important for the public to hear them. And I think for the three chairs to continue to work together to say, you know, we're all in this together and we're going to get through it together. But until we know where that end point is, and we don't right now, we just have to be cautious.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on that?
I just want to say, I'm glad that John finally turned his video on. I was missing his delightful spectrum there. Uh-oh,
I know you missed me, Fillmore, so that's why I did it for you, pal.
thank you.
You're welcome.
What are you doing there, John?
How are you,
Okay.
Dan?
Doing something there for Fillmore or what?
Just listening attentively.
Okay, review of financials, Stace.
So I do have the fund balance projection. It's very similar. Last time I could share it if you'd like, or I could forward it all to you all. You have the expenditures. We talked about the taxes. Currently for this fiscal year, we've spent about 40,000 on the tropical storm. We're still waiting to hear from FEMA to see if it qualifies for reimbursement. So we've tracked the expenditures, and our plan is to try to get at least 75% of that reimbursed to the town. This year so far, we've spent about 32,000 on additional COVID expenditures. We will request reimbursement for that. And that was basically PPE, additional PPE equipment. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the financials that you received. You can let me know.
You could send around the latest fund balance. I guess that's, is the audit complete so that that's the final?
No, the auditors haven't even come out yet, Fillmore. They're coming out in 2 weeks. The last week of September, they're coming out. So it,
Come
well,
on,
they
Fillmore.
don't
This
analyze
year ended.
nor. What's that?
I was gonna give Fillmore a shot, but I'll let it go.
Okay. They normally are not finalized till November, late November.
You know, with the way 2020 is going, and this is another one thing I'm worried about, who knows what the winter is going to be like. So I think that's another piece of natural disasters that we should be preparing for.
Yes, and
But somebody's playing Jumanji on us, and we got to get to the next level.
there may be more hurricanes coming our way too.
Yep.
Yeah, and just so you know, with the fund balance, you know, with the pandemic and the spring and things being closed, our fund balance is looking healthier than we would have normally seen. So we'll take that while we can.
Right. All right, anything else on that? Questions? Okay, liaison reports. Nobody's doing anything.
I'll just say quickly, the senior center, I think continuing to do a great job in light of this COVID situation, even though the building is closed. And just to help spread the word, I asked at their meeting last week, of all the things you're doing now, what's your greatest need? And that would be drivers for Meals on Wheels. I think because of COVID, they're actually serving more meals. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think they had historically done about 60 meals a day, and they're up to like 70 or maybe 70 to 80, because definitely more people are needing the service. But at the same time, most of their drivers are retirement age themselves, and maybe so a lot of their drivers are sitting on the sidelines during COVID because they're just a part of that at-risk demographic. So those two things are working against each other. So they're always looking for new drivers in that area in particular. If anyone is interested, or just spread that word. That's it.
Good, thank you. Anything else? Peggy is not on the call. She had several meetings tonight. She did text me during the meeting and ask if, after she finally put her day to rest, if she needed me to come, I needed her to come. I said no, I figured she could use the break. But if there's any questions for her, we can certainly reach out to her because she did say she was available. Citizens' comments. Danielle, you got it?
Yes, so Gus has a comment.
Go ahead, Gus.
Good evening.
Gus, you
How
got to
guys
unmute
doing?
yourself. There you go.
How you guys
Good.
doing?
Good.
Do two things. I had to turn the microphone on, and then on the screen I have to activate it. So that's why there's 2 or 3 second delay. Two things.
I'm trouble hearing that.
Going back to SIP, which you had a very, very long discussion on, and you're talking about it as out in 5 years. I would suggest for your consideration that you might want to have David Anderson and the chair of the Coastal Resiliency Committee come in sometime this fall and talk to you about what the implications might be. And I'm talking now 20 years. But the thing is that the planning for it is very extensive and is going to be very expensive because of engineering studies, the accommodating the various state and federal environmental regulations and whatever issues you're going to be dealing with is also a long period of time. So I think when you take a look at SIP, you might want to introduce a coastal resiliency for the first part of the planning fund. And then if you read the report itself, you'll see there are issues in there about doing some things to buffer the shoreline initially. And then eventually, maybe in 15 or 20 years, you might have to be installing community septic systems because some of the septic systems along the shoreline will be compromised. And then eventually, there's an issue in there of buying out some 27 properties because eventually they will not be sustainable for living. And again, those things are over a period of 20 to 25 years, but some of the planning dollars may be coming in within the tail end of your new SIP year. So you might just want to get an overview from those people. They're not going to be able to give you numbers, dollars, cents, and that type of thing. Okay. The other thing is the academy issue. It's been tied, the funding for it has been tied to the school program. And I've been through 4 school building projects and know the financing issues and the timeline that goes in with that. And just briefly, if the schools were going to exercise a program next year, they would have to get a bonding referendum in the spring, and they would have to submit their proposal to the State Board of Education by June 30th of 2021. And I'm not too sure that's going to happen. In fact, I'm betting it probably will not. So that means Academy is tied to that. And we're talking now another 2 or 3 years before anything happens with Academy. I would really ask the board and the Board of Selectmen to seriously, really seriously consider taking Academy as a standalone project and getting a yay or a nay on it. And I'm especially interested in it because I was on the 2005-2000 committee that studied that building. And we studied more than that building. We studied all the downtown buildings, including Memorial Hall, the library, Academy, Island Avenue, and Memorial Hall. And I was on the subcommittee for Island Avenue. So I, really, I ask you, urge you, whatever I can do without insulting you, to really take a look and see whether Academy should be split off and getting a yay or a nay from the townspeople as to what to do with it. And if it's a nay, then we tear it down and build the park. Thank you.
Because I agree with you 100%. We should sell it and have someone develop it and generate some additional tax revenue.
Thank you.
That was
Kenny.
already been
Thank you,
turned down by
Gus.
the voters.
Thank you.
With that,
That was
Ken,
our, that, and I was on the,
Jace, where's
I was
my
on the
mute button
latest
for
Academy
Kenny?
committee too. And that was our thought. We wanted to get some tax revenue.
Yeah.
We did that with the airport property.
Yeah, that didn't work out too
We-
well,
We're
did it?
spending $12 million, including interest.
That's
to
another
avoid
mistake.
Collecting $1.25 million a year in taxes.
Agree. I agree. It's the airport. was a
Thank you,
big
Kenny.
mistake.
Okay,
you,
good
Gus.
night.
Anything-
Thank you.
Good night, Gus. Have a good
Thanks, Gus.
night.
You too.
Danielle, anybody else?
Danielle left.
Erin did have a question. But I don't see her raising her hand anymore. I could allow her to talk and see if she still has her
Okay.
question.
Yeah, 'cause she's on CIP, isn't she, Jude?
I think she might have left. I don't see her
She
anymore.
said I
No, she's
withdrew my
here.
question.
Did she leave?
Okay.
Oh, she said she withdraws her question, so.
Okay.
You can't do that, Erin. If you got a question, you got to ask it.
You answered my question.
Okay.
It was about the
Good
criteria
answer.
for evaluating projects on the CIP, but it was discussed quite a bit, so
Okay.
I'll withdraw it.
Took quite a bit.
I'll think of another question though, Jean,
Okay.
just to keep you
We'll
on
be
here.
here. I'll stay.
Okay.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
But Erin, you have to use your picture if you ask another question.
Okay. I don't know how, I can't find myself on here anymore. I thought Danielle got rid of me.
She has that authority.
I respect that.
All right,
think
anybody else? Oh,
Oh, no, that's it.
okay.
I don't
Danielle,
think-
anybody else?
Nope, there's no more questions.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Fillmore.
Move
No,
to
I'm-
adjourn.
I have nothing.
Nothing?
Okay. What do we got, Gene?
That's all I got.
All right. Do you need a
I need,
motion
What?
to adjourn?
That was Fillmore's cue for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah.
all in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
We're out. Good night, everyone.
Have a great